Hi there. Welcome to our live inside the Radiantly Alive Women. I'm really happy to be here on the weekend for this special edition, still going through our SCAR series, but we are doing this video today from a request. I have been answering all of your questions inside the group, inside the community, and which includes doing a video on each SCAR that you're interested in. And this question has come up a few times, and I thought that I would address it in its own life. It really brings me a lot of joy to know that there's some compassion and understanding and connecting the dots going on inside your own kind of personal bubble. And so I wanted to help that along, continue to help and provide some benefit to those who are really partaking in the SCAR series. So as you come into this live, please let me know that you're here. Drop me a little hi, hashtag live. If you're watching this on a replay, just hashtag replay. And let's begin talking about this question. It's a really good question, and there's a lot of detail to it. I think that I'm going to create like a few day kind of challenge or kind of education series so that you can really understand this, but I'm going to bring some really important concepts and topics to this live today so that you can kind of start to get a sense of my thought process. My thought process is coming from nearly a decade of being a clinical therapist, and there's a lot of really important concepts and ideas that I want you to start to learn, to start to understand, because they're not complicated, but there is a kind of a smarter, more efficient approach and a way to work with yourself in a way that is very mindful, very respectful, but also getting right to the point. If you've ever worked with me or you've heard me speaking a lot, you'll know that I am I really want to get into the important pieces. I don't want to dabble around in the shallow. I really want to find the source of the problem so that when we do start to work the source of the problem, or when we work on something that is very significant, then all of the other kind of minor or secondary symptomology can no longer hold water. It will just dissolve or resolve as you go for those higher important things. So I'm going to take you with me today on that little journey and try to clarify this major question. If you have many scars on your body, how do you start? Or, which scar do you work with, and what's the kind of thought process behind that? So if you have any questions at all during this live, and you are live, please just ask them. I'm very happy to clarify, go into a personal example. If you have something that you want to share and get an insight on, that's the best thing about being live with me, is you can ask me a question and you get a direct answer related to you. If you're just watching this on the replay, know that I'm very active inside this community. I'm seeing all of your comments and questions, and so I will answer your question through typing when the replay is happening. And if it's a big question, then I'm very happy to do a live on it, just totally getting into a particular topic if it needs to be expanded upon. Okay, so I have a couple little notes here because there's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. If you took my master class, I think it was last month, a month and a half ago now, I gave a really important list of 10. These 10 things are my top priority features, and I'll list them off and you'll start to understand why they are top priority. These are not necessarily all related to scars, but you'll see how they could be related to scars, and I'll help to kind of break that down. So if you have any of these in your personal timeline, in your history, if you've experienced one or many of these, you want to start pushing those things to the top of your list, or places to be curious and interested in. They are without a doubt a major kind of strain in the body on all the systems, and so we want to be aware of those things. These things may not have been ever on your radar, and that's totally fine. Some of them are a little bit funky, but if you have any questions about them, please let me know, because once you understand why, it will make a lot of sense. It just may not be the traditional kind of Western therapy model of 10 that you may have heard before. So my top priority, as you may have already guessed, is scars. That's my absolute number one, which is why we're doing all of this information, because that is the bulk of my work. I help women really transform their well-being by working their scars. So that's the first. The second thing is any kind of injury to the head and face. This could include scars. So if you've been had a head injury, been unconscious, had a concussion, had whiplash, something done to your face, baseball to the eyeball, any of those things, those are starting to rise to your list, to the top of your list. The third one is giving birth. Giving birth is a big deal. Whether you're doing it vaginally or via C-section, giving birth is an incredibly strenuous and beautiful process, but it needs to be fully worked through physically and emotionally. Then I have emotional turmoil. Big things in your life that have caused strain, suffering, pain, hurt, grief. This could be difficult relationship dynamics, divorce, trouble with your children. It could be passing away of loved ones. It could be job, financial strain, just emotional turmoil that is extended for a period of time. Then I have in here incongruent with your values. When I said this one in the masterclass, everyone was like, whoa, what do you mean? And then when we started to talk about it more, it was a lot of like aha light bulb moments for a lot of women, because when you are incongruent with your values, meaning you're going against your own value system, that's gonna leave an imprint or a mark. And oftentimes we can do a few of those throughout our lifetime, and they are real kind of sore, tender, raw spots in our life. So every person is living by a set of values, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, you're doing it. And when you go against those values, there's some healing or something that needs to be done to resolve that kind of inner turmoil that comes from being incongruent. Then I have anything on the torso and midline, huge deal. And this could be scars as well. So think about scars on the torso and midline. It could also be other things in the torso and midline, big hits to the chest, rib cage, fractured ribs, stuff in the neck. Torso and midline, I really mean like from the crown of your head, like tip to tail, pelvic floor, stuff that's gone on in that area. And then I have high impact injuries. High impact injuries are obviously very straining and forceful on the body. And depending on the high impact injury, whether it's a car accident or something bigger, they will also leave their mark, and we want to acknowledge those. A lot of people will say like, oh, I got in a car accident and it wasn't a big deal. And then when you ask them more detail about it and you kind of start to ask questions, the car accident is often quite a bit of a big deal. They'll remember like, oh, I had a lot of like neck tension for like months and months and months after. And usually people just wait until that goes away. And that is, in my opinion, not the best methodology. We want to resolve stuff and work on them directly. We want to avoid the natural tendency to pull away and kind of run from pain and slowly walk our way back towards directly impacting it, working with it directly. Then I have jaw and dental work. Jaw and dental work, huge. Your head, your face holds one of the most valuable organs in the body, the kind of central hub of your nervous system. And you have a lot of cranial nerves in and around the face and head. And you also have all of your senses. So other than touch, which is kind of everywhere, the other senses are unique to inside of your head and your jaw. So this area is really important. It's of a high importance. And when you've had damage to your jaw, when you've had a lot of dental work, scarring in the mouth, it could be of high importance. So you also want to think about scars in your here, in your jaw. Okay, and then we have feet and ankles. Feet and ankles is how you connect with the ground. It's like your first contact for groundedness. If you've had scars on your feet from glass, from a bunion, from whatever else kind of surgery, really bad ankle fractures, those can play a huge part in you feeling stable and calm and kind of organized in your body and in your mind. Quite literally, like how your bony alignment kind of stacks on top of one another. Big deal. There's a lot of bones in the foot. There's a ton of bones in the foot which includes the toes, includes the ankle. It has, including your hands, like there's a ton of bones in these too. The feet have 25% of the bones and articulation, joint surfaces of the whole body. So if something is amiss there, if something's incongruent, out of alignment, it could show up elsewhere in the body. Then my final one is synthetic hormone use. Synthetic hormone use includes stuff that we use like IUDs, birth control, any type of other synthetic hormone use later in your life, in your 40s and 50s. Those can all wreak havoc on your internal kind of processes, and that will kind of show itself in a variety of different ways over time. It's one of the main sources for why we are kind of depleted and drained and have chronic pain and have bad digestion, and we're really struggling with our fertility when we're in our 30s, and we kind of wake up out of the synthetic hormone compounded use. That's a big problem. So that list, if you think about that list, and the other two things I want you to think about when you're trying to figure out how do I choose where to work from, I want you to think about two different things. One, your own personal timeline. Everyone will have a set of stuff that's happened to them in their life, emotional stuff, physical stuff, road marks in life. I got married, I graduated, all those things. That needs to be very clear, because the other thing you want to pay attention to is your current symptomology, what you're currently feeling. This is really important because a lot of people, but a lot of women, have no idea what they're currently feeling. They're kind of avoiding the reality of how bad stuff really is. There's a lot of depletion. We're really tired. We're really, spread thin. We have like layers of confusion for a variety of different reasons. We're bombarded by the health and fitness industry around what to do, what not to do. There's a lot of stuff that we just don't have clear information. And so we really want to get clear on these two aspects. Because if you're clear on these two things, you are so far ahead of the game. You are literally like miles ahead of the average person. You're in like the top 5% of people who really are in acknowledgement of their life and of their situation. So your timeline, in my masterclass, you literally get a piece of paper, draw a line on it, and get clear on what happened and when it happened. Your current symptomology, once you know it, you got words around it, you have language developed around how you actually feel, which is hard. That means we have to have an honest, real conversation with ourselves, which is uncomfortable. We gotta be real with where we're at. And a lot of us pretend that we are somewhere else because we want to be somewhere else, but that the wanting doesn't make it real. We want to deal with who we are now in this moment so that we can actually resolve the stuff. When you get clear on your symptomology, you want to start tracing that back, like when did that start? The origin, like how did that come about? A lot of people will say, this is really common, they'll say like, I have back pain right now, but it just started, it just started a couple months ago. And then you ask them a couple more questions, and then you'll learn that the back pain is actually the exact same thing that's been happening since they were 20, but it just comes and goes. So we have a very kind of distorted version of what's going on in our body, because a lot of the time we think for example, I'm just going to say an example that I hear really often. I had back pain, but then the chiropractor fixed it. But then it came back, in my 30s when I had children. And then I went to physio, and then they fixed it. But the real kind of truth of it is that never really got resolved. They're taking the pain and the obviousness of it, they're toning that down, but the actual the problem has not been resolved. It's still there. It just gets quieted down and gets increased depending on what you're going through in your life and the stimulus that happens. So we want to be real clear around our symptomology, when it started. When did I start getting headaches? Oh, it was actually when I was 15 and I started going on birth control. Really good information. So all these things you want to think about. They're so important. And so when we start thinking about our scars, so we've been talking so much about scars, I want you to think about when these scars happened in your timeline. And then the other thing I want you to think about is, did you have any of those symptoms before the scar, before the accident, before the surgery, whatever it was, or was it really like nothing quite felt the same since that thing, since that surgery, since that accident? And then there's kind of a snowball spiral effect, which includes, whatever, tons of different things can come out. I've experienced that myself. When we ignore one thing, it can kind of compound over years and years and decades. And then all of a sudden we got all the stuff. We can't sleep. Our relationship dynamics are kind of funky. We have like poor inner dialogue. Our digestion's a mess. We have chronic pain in our body. We don't feel good. We feel heavy. We're really tired. All this stuff can kind of come out, but we got to go back to the origin. We got to go as close as we can to the meat of it all. So that is so important. So that's my main suggestion, is to start with that. Now, let's say, for example, you have a specific incident where you have multiple scars. So there's a woman in the group, and she showed an x-ray of her arm, but she had metal in both of the joints, in the wrist and in the elbow. That's very common. There's been surgeries, for example, like giving birth, where you have multiple scars. And maybe you had a double back surgery. There's so many different examples of it when you can have multiple different scars. How do you know which one to work with? Or maybe you have a lot of investigative surgery, like in your abdomen, that ended up being a removal of an organ, a removal of this or something low. And so how do you figure that out? So I want to try to guide you into that, because that is, I think, the kind of meat of what women here are asking. So I want you to think about, there's a few different ways, and I won't have like the perfect example for you. You're going to have to kind of feel this out, because you'll know best. And if I was working with you one-to-one, we would have a really in-depth conversation, and I would use my clinical expertise and just professional background to make a really clear-cut, obvious decision. But I'm going to help you with how I think, and hopefully you'll be able to come to your own answer. So the first thing you want to think about with your scars, whether you just have many scattered from about 2 decades or some that are closely like during the same time frame, is you want to get a good assessment. You want to do that first thing that I've been telling you guys to do. I've been saying the first thing you got to do is you got to close your eyes, make touch contact with the scar, feel the physicality of the scar. Most importantly in this circumstance, the altered sensation. Is there dullness? Is there hypersensitivity? Is there knottedness, tension, like puckering, like kind of like a binding look to it? And then the third thing is you really want to pull out the emotional kind of the energy there. What's there? Think about the before, during, and after the event. What kind of emotional charge or what kind of emotion is wound up and bound up in there? I would like you to put this on a piece of paper. It can be so clarifying, because you may find a pattern in your life that you had no idea that you had. So if you start to put all your scars on a piece of paper or a document, I'm like an old-fashioned girl, I like to write stuff down. But if you want to do it on your laptop, that's fine too. And when you have that information, I want you to look at all of that and figure out which ones do you feel like least connected to. Meaning, do you have the least amount of information? Maybe it feels like there's not a lot of sensation there. Maybe when you just touch it for the first or second time, you're like, Kendra, I got nothing. I don't know. It just feels like black. It feels dark. I hear that a lot. It feels like I can't connect with it. You want to know which scars are in that kind of camp. And then you want to know which scars are in the opposite. Which ones are heavily emotional. Which ones, as soon as you touch them, make you feel nauseous, make you feel icky, make you feel an immediate heat rising of resentment or anger. Which ones are there? And then when you have that kind of spectrum, you can do one of two things. And actually both answers are correct. If you want to, you can go and lean into the ones where you have less connection, less information about, because as you start building a relationship with that area, with the scar, with the event itself, you will get so much clarification and stuff will come out of there. And there's good reason to want to spend time there. There's a disconnect. There's a disharmony there where you are lacking a connection to part of your body. So there's a lot of goodness there. This could be sometimes the struggle point, because there's a lot of, you could be like, I'm doing the thing and I'm following what Kendra said and I'm not really feeling the stuff. And so people, if they're doing this part on their own, have a tendency to peter off because they want to do it, but at the same time there's like an emotional block and a lot of fear around going actually into that. Usually it's fear-based. It's just not really wanting to go there because they do know that there is a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, a lot of sorrow, grief, whatever. There's something there and it feels scary to go towards. And so they will, with great intentions, be trying, but maybe not getting it as, not being as impactful as they want. Eventually that will come to a head. If the woman is persistent and the woman genuinely, with sincerity, wants to change and wants to transform, that will absolutely start to, move and change. But this is a good opportunity to go towards. Now, this camp that I was saying is highly emotional, maybe very sensitive, feeling like you want to throw up when you touch it. That's very common. There's a good reason to go towards that one, obviously. It could be very instantly relieving. It could be like taking a pressure cooker lid off, and it could be incredibly profound and very, didn't really recognize the potential of scar work, and you like immediately receive like, whoa, this is like really good and really intense. The kind of thing you want to watch for this is we have a tendency in the modern world to like force and strive and be a bit aggressive and kind of tune out with the subtleties of how we should actually be meeting the area. It's almost like we want to pile drive into it rather than fully experience what's there. And this is oftentimes quite a heated, potentially overwhelming place. You may have, a scar in any version of this. You may feel like, yeah, I feel it. It feels ropey. Like I can feel the pain, or I can feel like the sorrow that it brings when I touch that. I feel that grief. And then you start working it and it becomes like a much more full expression. Or you could be in either of these kind of camps. It totally depends. So there is goodness in choosing either of those. And then the other few things that I want to just talk about is lowest hanging fruit, as I will call it. Sometimes it's really good to go after the lowest hanging fruit. A lot of the time we can get like really wrapped up in trying to find the origin and like kind of slowing ourselves down and maybe even getting stuck for a bit because we're so kind of bent on trying to find the source. It's not always necessary that we find the big one. We don't need to do it that way. There's a lot of good reason for going after the lowest hanging fruit, meaning going after a scar that maybe isn't as impactful. Maybe you have a scar on your elbow and it doesn't necessarily align with these 10 top priorities when I was talking about scars on the face and head, on the midline, all of those sorts of things. But you'll get really comfortable with the technique. You'll get really comfortable with the method, and you will start to see positive benefit. When we start to see positive benefit, we want to continue. We feel like, oh yeah, this is working. I really like this. This is doing something for me. I can feel the change in my body. I can feel the way that it's like releasing tension and it's making me feel more calm, or whatever it is that happens. So there's a good reason to go after the lowest hanging fruit. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And sometimes when we have a lot of other strain, just stress in our life, we don't want to go after like the big, massive thing. We can easily glide into the lowest hanging fruit. And once we start, we've all heard this, like all you need to do is start. Once you start, everything becomes a lot easier to understand, a lot more comfortable. We all the time get just stuck in the I don't know where to start thing, so I'm not going to start at all. Or I did start, it felt really intense and scary, so I must be doing it wrong. That's another thing that really commonly happens, which is absolutely incorrect. If something changes, that means you're changing. If you're doing something and nothing's changing, or you're changing it in a really small kind of controlled way, that's not really how we want to transform either. We want to be working in a way that's very efficient and effective. We don't want to be dilly-dallying in all this small stuff forever, because we're going to feel like a project, and we don't want to feel like that either. We want to feel as much as we can like we are, which is the truth, in flux and in motion and easily able to transform and resolve stuff if we have that open commitment to ourselves. So the lowest hanging fruit is a really good way to go about it. You don't have to go after the big mama if you don't want to. Then another thing I want to just talk about is access. Sometimes we have scars on our body that are really hard to access. For example, like depending on your mobility, the scars on your back, if you've had a back surgery, can be hard to access. If you've had an episiotomy, sometimes those can be hard to access. And they can be, it can be a roadblock at the beginning. So you can choose something that's really accessible, one that feels comfortable for you to spend time with and, you know, do a daily practice with. Whatever it is that I have given as like the preliminary step, you can do that. It's like a lot of people find it really uncomfortable to be working in the back and the scar right off the hop. So I'll often tell them to start working something in the front, because it's very common that women who have C-section, hysterectomies, any type of like lower abdomen, tummy tuck kind of stuff, it's really common that they'll have low back pain, and also very common that they'll have discectomies or lumbar fusions, because this one happened first, then this one happened second. Often it could be the other way around, but it's usually that in that way. And so we want to work the one that's accessible. We want to work the one that's like right here in front of us. We can see it, we can build a relationship visually with it, and so on and so forth. So that's important to think about as well. The other thing I want to just talk about that I explain with all my clients is this idea of ace high. So if you think about a deck of cards, my goal when I work with women is to always go towards ace high. So there'll be like different levels of priority things in the body that I will be like, I'll be cataloging in my head, and that you can catalog in your own head. You know, there'll be an ankle sprain in there. There'll be, I broke my elbow and I broke some fingers in there. I cut my finger cutting carrots. There'll be all of these things in your timeline, but they are not very high in the priority list. And there is like a deck of cards, they'd be like low in there. They'd be like 5s and 2s and 7 of hearts. We want to go after something that's ace high, because I imagine like this card castle. When we go after those ones, oftentimes the symptomology of all of these other things will resolve completely when you go after things that have high impact. So what do I mean by that? Maybe you have an ankle sprain, and the thing that you notice day to day is you have like a lot of hip tension. You have a lot of hip tension going on because your ankle sprain. Maybe you get like some sort of like, you know, atmospheric pressure problem in your finger when like this, when it rains heavily, you can feel it. So I'm like cataloging all these things in my head. I'm like, okay, well that could change, that could shift, that could move. Maybe like this elbow doesn't straighten all the way. It hurts when they do overhead movement. And I'm thinking like, yeah, okay, that's part of the piece, that's part of the pie, but we don't necessarily need to go after all those small little things. We don't need to be nitpicky. We want to go after things that are of high importance, so that when you go after the ace high, the trickle down effect is incredibly impactful and can kind of clean up all of those kind of secondary things that are happening, because the main problem is there. It's untapped. Oftentimes scars are untapped. Nobody's working them. Nobody's thinking about them. So if you haven't had any scar work in an area, holy moly, can it be so healing and so transformative, because it's just like this ball of physical and emotional tension that is untapped. Nobody's worked on it. And so when that gets released, the positive benefit just ripples through the whole system. And so that's what I mean when I'm talking about ace high. Then I have this other just small little analogy that also helps. And I talk about wanting to find your 100%. So usually when I work with women, they're not coming in, they're not saying like, Kendra, like I need you to work on my C-section scar. That's usually not the entry point. We don't understand that is potentially the source of this chronic depletion, of this chronic digestive stuff. And so when people come to me, they're saying, I've been so tired, I can't, get out of this. It's been years and years and years, and I'm really at my breaking point. That's usually what I hear. Or I've had back pain for decades and decades and decades. I try everything and nothing is even touching the sides. It just keeps coming back. These are the things that people will come in and talk to me about. And so I want to find that person's 100% to resolve that. So let's just go with anxiety, because it's kind of abstract. I think we all get the physical pain. Let's go with a more abstract one. Let's say someone comes in and anxiety is a very, it can be a very detailed, complex thing, but when you know someone's timeline and how things are lining up, it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. So if you have, crippling anxiety and you have all of these things in your timeline, which includes scars, I want to find the person's 100% to resolve the anxiety fully and completely. So maybe a C-section scar, for example, will clear and resolve like 60% of that anxiety. It gets things moving. The person's feeling a lot of positive benefit. Things are changing. Things are feeling lighter, brighter, better. But then we still need to kind of go looking for that 40. Where is that 40%? Is it in the past with, relationship dynamics, finance stuff, whatever? It could, it could literally be anything. So I want to go in, and you want to go in and find your 100%. And it's this also just recognition that there's a process that needs to happen. And when one thing changes, some other things will start to change, just like the ace high. And we want to constantly be in touch with ourselves, be aware, be conscious, asking questions from a very curious place. This is not a project, I need to improve myself because I feel badly about myself. Things don't usually go very well if we have that as our kind of base inner dialogue. This is a very kind of curious, transformative thing where you're going like honest conversations. I want to find my 120%, 100% so that I can, feel better, show up in my life, spend time with my kids, my grandkids. I want to be able to run in the summer because it's beautiful outside. Whatever those things are, how do we get there? And we want to get there from being real. Really, we want to be real with ourselves and try to find that 100%, because it will be there. And when we are thinking about ourselves holistically, and we are thinking about ourselves in a way of potential and opportunity, rather than feeling bad and shame about maybe decisions we made in the past, or heavily gunked up emotion that can be in scars, when this gets released, you'll be different. There's no way about it. So you want to think about all of those different components when you're trying to choose which scar. So I hope that was helpful and a little bit clarifying and helping you to kind of see the forward projection of where we're going. So if anyone has any questions on that, please let me know, and you can just type something in right now. I'll just wait a moment. And again, if you have a question and you're watching this on replay, please reach out. It's so important that you feel like, this works for you, so that you can, grab hold of this and really run with it. I think that the way that I explain stuff now, I've been explaining stuff, these type of concepts to people for a really long time. I've worked with chronic and complex types of pain for so long, and it's very normal to feel, brain fog and confusion and bogged down and really kind of that helpless, almost state of despair. That's okay. And I'm happy to explain things over and over from a variety of different perspectives, which is why we're doing all the SCAR stuff. So watch as many of the SCAR videos as you can. Ask me questions on any of these topics. And it's been really nice to help just bring shed a little bit of light onto all of this SCAR series work. So next week we'll do 2 more SCAR videos. And again, I'm here if you need. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you soon. Have a good rest of your weekend.